Welcome to Southwest Desert, where adventure meets the arid beauty of the American Southwest. Join us as we explore the rugged landscapes, uncover hidden historical gems, and dive deep into the rich legends and culture of this iconic region. Subscribe now and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on the latest desert adventures. Please leave a like or comment. This is very helpful. Let's journey together into the heart of the Southwest Desert. The Texas Gulf Coast, 1821. A brass rod sinks into muddy marsh soil, its top barely visible above the surface. Three men work quickly under darkness, burying a fortune in Spanish gold and silver. The leader, a notorious pirate, takes careful measurements from two distant tree groves, recording these coordinates in his journal before turning to his companions. 3 years. Wait 3 years before returning. With that, Jean Lafitte, the Gulf's most infamous buccaneer, disappears into the night, leaving behind a treasure that remains undiscovered to this day. Welcome to Southwest Desert. I'm your host, Alan, and today we're exploring the extraordinary story of Jean Lafitte's lost treasure, a tale of piracy, desperate escapes, accidental discoveries, and a fortune that continues to captivate treasure hunters 2 centuries later. Jean Lafitte wasn't just any pirate. He was the preeminent figure among Gulf of Mexico buccaneers in the early 1800s, dashing, intelligent, and ruthlessly effective. While historians debate which tales about Lafitte are fact versus fiction, substantial evidence supports his success in capturing Spanish vessels and accumulating significant wealth. By 1819, Lafitte had established a thriving operation in Louisiana, but increasing pressure from the U.S. Navy forced him to seek new territory. He set his sights on Galveston Island, Texas, an ideal location with a natural harbor and proximity to Spanish shipping lanes. Upon arriving at Galveston, Lafitte discovered a rival pirate band already established there. Rather than seeking another location, he eliminated the competition through swift military action, then repurposed an abandoned Spanish fortress about half a mile west of where the Galveston Yacht Basin stands today. From this new base, Lafitte's business flourished. His crews specialized in targeting Spanish vessels carrying New World gold and silver. Using shallow draft vessels that could navigate waters where larger naval ships couldn't follow, Lafitte conducted raid after successful raid, amassing a substantial fortune. But Lafitte made a fatal miscalculation. Initially avoiding American ships to prevent U.S. government intervention, he gradually began targeting vessels flying the American flag. By 1821, reports of these attacks reached Washington, prompting a decisive response. The USS Enterprise, under Captain Kearny's command, arrived at Galveston with clear orders: end Lafitte's piracy. After days of tense negotiations, Kearny delivered an ultimatum. Lafitte had 30 days to evacuate the island or face military action. The guns of the Enterprise, trained on Lafitte's fortress, left no doubt about American resolve. Just 4 days before this deadline, disaster struck. One of Lafitte's vessels, the Pride, ran aground near the mouth of the Lavaca River. The ship's planks fractured, and it began to sink, along with a fortune in Spanish treasure. Facing both the sinking ship and the American deadline, Lafitte organized an emergency salvage operation. He selected only his most trusted associates to handle the treasure: a chest filled with gold coins from various countries and eras, valuable jewelry, and 2 canvas sacks containing Spanish silver bars. Under cover of darkness, Lafitte and his men transported this fortune several hundred yards across treacherous salt marsh. The location was chosen with care. Soil composition, visibility, and accessibility for future recovery all factored into the decision. Most critically, Lafitte created a precise marking system. He took compass readings from the burial site to two prominent tree groves known locally as mottes, the Kentucky mott and the Malden mott. These landmarks would serve as reference points for future recovery. All details were meticulously recorded in his journal. As a final marker, Lafitte drove a brass rod deep into the ground at the burial site, leaving only about 8 inches visible above the surface. With the Navy's deadline approaching, Lafitte gave specific instructions to his trusted companions. They were to return to New Orleans, adopt honest lives, and wait 3 years before returning for the treasure. Lafitte himself planned to head north of Red River, though he kept his exact destination secret. And so, the most notorious pirate of the Gulf sailed away from Galveston Island, leaving behind a fortune that would spawn generations of treasure hunters. The first attempts to recover the treasure were doomed from the start. One of Lafitte's companions returned to New Orleans as instructed, but fell ill with malaria. On his deathbed, he shared the treasure information with a friend who mounted several expeditions. Despite having partial knowledge of the location, each attempt failed. The second companion settled permanently in New Orleans, starting a family and legitimate career. In his final years, he passed the treasure knowledge to his sons. They organized their own expedition but were equally unsuccessful. Changes in the marsh landscape, inaccuracies in the directions, and the challenging environment all contributed to their failure. Throughout the following decades, the legend of Lafitte's treasure persisted, drawing people to the Texas Gulf Coast. In one remarkable incident, a rancher named Hill, who had established property near the Lavaca River, came tantalizingly close to the treasure. One of Hill's hired hands was supervising livestock in the marsh when he spotted a metal rod protruding from the soil. Needing to secure his horse, he used the rod as a hitching post. When his horse moved, it loosened the rod. Curious, the worker pulled it free and brought it back to show his employer. Hill, familiar with the Lafitte legend, immediately recognized the significance of the brass rod. He questioned his employee about the exact location and organized a search expedition for the next day. Despite the hired hand's guidance and a full day of methodical searching, they couldn't relocate the exact spot. The uniformity of the marsh landscape and the absence of the critical marker meant Hill's team was searching blindly. Lafitte's carefully placed marker, perhaps the key to finding his buried fortune, had been unwittingly removed. Around 1870, a turkey hunter crawling through tall grass near the Lavaca River mouth had his own brush with the lost treasure. His knee struck something hard partially buried in the soil. The object looked like a brick, and the hunter took it home for examination. That evening, he and his brother discovered it was actually a bar of pure silver. Recognizing the potential connection to the Lafitte legend, they returned the next day but failed to relocate the site despite searching for miles. What makes this story particularly intriguing is that the hunters reported seeing both the Kentucky mata and Malden mott in the distance, the very landmarks Lafitte had used in his marking system. Had they understood the significance of these features, they might have triangulated the position and discovered the entire cache. Perhaps the most bizarre chapter in this saga is the tale of Crazy Ben, an eccentric figure who appeared in Galveston during the 1880s. Ben lived in a shack near the Lavaca River mouth and claimed to have been a cabin boy for Lafitte. According to his story, he had secretly witnessed the treasure burial as a 10-year-old. After Lafitte's departure, Ben remained in the area, supporting himself through fishing and odd jobs. What drew attention was his habit of paying for drinks at waterfront bars with Spanish gold coins, precisely the type Lafitte was known to have captured. In his frequent drunken states, Ben boasted that he would periodically visit the burial site, take a handful of coins, and rebury the rest for later. Despite having access to substantial wealth, he maintained a modest lifestyle, attracting both curiosity and suspicion. Local residents often attempted to follow Ben, hoping he would lead them to the treasure. He developed elaborate methods to detect and evade such surveillance, but Ben's luck eventually ran out. After a night of heavy drinking at a local tavern, he was followed by two unidentified figures. The next morning, Ben's body was discovered on the shore near his home, his throat slashed. Had Ben truly discovered Lafitte's treasure? And did this knowledge cost him his life? The mystery deepened with his death. A notable expedition in the 1920s was led by treasure hunters from Oklahoma, who claimed to possess original notes from Lafitte's journal. They successfully located both mottes, the key landmarks in Lafitte's marking system, but still failed to find the treasure itself. If found today, the value of Lafitte's treasure would be staggering. Beyond the inherent worth of the gold and silver, the historical coins would have immense numismatic value. Museum curators and private collectors would likely enter bidding wars for artifacts from such a legendary cache. What makes Lafitte's treasure particularly compelling is its plausibility. Unlike many treasure legends built entirely on folklore, this story contains numerous elements supported by historical record. Jean Lafitte was indeed a successful pirate who operated in the Gulf. He was forced from Galveston by the U.S. Navy in 1821. Multiple independent accounts mention the brass marker, the silver bar discovery, and the mysterious Crazy Ben with his Spanish coins. Gold that vanishes without a trace. A mysterious prospector who disappears into the wilderness. A forgotten treasure worth millions, hidden somewhere in the sun-scorched hills along the Colorado River. This isn't fiction. This is the true story of the Dutchman's lost gold. The year was 1910. Theodore Roosevelt had just left office. Arizona wasn't even a state yet. Along the wild Colorado River that separated California from Arizona territory, a young miner named Ed Rochester was trying to save his life by leaving the deadly dust of the gold mines behind. Rochester had been operating what miners called a wiggle tail at the Gold Road mine near Oatman, Arizona. These stoping drills earned their nickname from snake-like movements, but they had an even more ominous reputation as widowmakers. Without water to suppress the dust, miners drilling upward worked in constant clouds of fine quartz particles, virtually guaranteeing silicosis, a death sentence in those days. After noticing his lungs becoming clogged, Rochester knew it was time to quit mining. With his health failing, he traveled to Needles, California, and purchased a boat from a Mojave Indian for $10. It was one of those specially designed Colorado River boats, a rowboat 16 to 20 feet long, practically flat-bottomed, with flared sides but running straight back from mid-bow with no closing in at the stern. Perfect for navigating shallow waters. Rochester loaded his vessel with beaver traps, groceries, and other necessities. His plan was simple: trap beaver along the river, sell the pelts, and live free from the deadly mine dust. Moving slowly downriver, he eventually found an ideal camping spot on the California side, about 4 miles upstream from where Imperial Dam would later be built. The spot was a small rincon formed where a wash entered the Colorado River. One morning, it rained. After the weather cleared, Rochester built a fire to dry his belongings. The smoke rose high into the clear desert air, a beacon visible for miles. That afternoon, Rochester heard a rumbling from the shore. Guided by the campfire smoke, an old prospector had found his way to camp. He had 2 burros hitched to a cart made from the front half of a wagon, the front wheels, the hounds, the rocking bolster. The old man was perched atop a pack lashed to the bolsters. The stranger was simply known as the Dutchman. In that era of the American West, personal questions were considered impolite. No one asked for names or backgrounds. A person was judged by present actions, not past. The Dutchman was confused and hungry, so Rochester invited him to supper. The old man ate ravenously. As they sat beside the fire in the gathering darkness, the Dutchman noticed Rochester's boat and asked about crossing the river. Rochester said he could transport the man and his animals across, but not the cart. The Dutchman accepted this limitation and promised payment. What happened next would haunt Rochester for decades. The old prospector retrieved a bundled canvas from his cart. Inside was 50 pounds of extraordinary ore, beautiful yellowish quartz so rich with gold that the precious metal was visible in every chunk. From this treasure the Dutchman selected 3 pieces and handed them to Rochester as payment for helping him cross to the Arizona side with enough supplies to reach Quartzsite. Through the night, the Dutchman shared the story of his find. He had begun his journey in Quartzsite with supplies provided by William E. Scott, the local grocer. He traveled through the Trigo Mountains, stopping at Jim Butler's camp along the way. Eventually, he reached the Colorado River opposite Picacho, crossing to California on a crude ferry. The Dutchman continued prospecting downriver toward Laguna Dam. This region, the Big Bend of the Colorado, was one of the most desolate places in the American Southwest. Few trails penetrated its harsh landscape, visitors were rare, and permanent inhabitants non-existent. During his travels, the Dutchman discovered a small basin high in the hills. From this vantage point, he could see a patch of green Colorado River bottomland, though he couldn't identify which part of the river it was. Looking south, he spotted smoke that he believed came from the settlement at Laguna Dam. The basin had a natural water hole, so the Dutchman made camp and began prospecting. In that remote basin, he found a high-grade vein with gold protruding from the rock's surface. The old man worked his strike until his burros broke into his food stores, eating or destroying most provisions. Facing starvation, he had no choice but to abandon his claim temporarily. He hitched his animals to the cart, loaded the extracted ore, and set off toward Laguna Dam. His journey halted at the steep-walled Senator Wash, which his cart couldn't cross. Following the gorge toward the river, he spotted Rochester's campfire. The Dutchman's plan was clear: cross back to Arizona territory, return to Quartzsite, pay Scott for his grub stake, gather new supplies, and return to his gold strike. The next morning, Rochester and the Dutchman began ferrying the burros and supplies across the Colorado. It was challenging work. They had to throw the first animal down, tie him, and skid him into the boat on skinned cottonwood poles. On the other side, it was even harder getting the animal onto solid ground. The second burro was more difficult. She had one ear cropped off, the sign of an outlaw burro. When they finally got her across, she bogged down between boat and shore. They struggled to dig her out of the mud. With everything safely on the Arizona side, the old Dutchman departed toward McPherson Wash, headed for Quartzsite. Rochester returned to his camp on the California side and continued downriver the next day. In Yuma, Rochester sold the 3 pieces of gold ore at Sanguinetti's store for $62 and received one of Sanguinetti's big black cigars. The storekeeper always gave a cigar when buying gold. $62 in 1910 would be worth nearly $2,000 today for just 3 chunks of ore. The value of the 50 pounds the Dutchman carried would have been immense. After selling his boat, shipping his beaver furs, and selling his traps, Rochester left for Los Angeles, never having learned the Dutchman's name. Names didn't amount to anything in the back country of those days. But Rochester couldn't forget the old prospector and his gold. The following year, he visited Quartzsite and asked Scott about the Dutchman. Scott remembered providing groceries to the old man the previous year, as he did for many prospectors, but hadn't seen him since. Jim Butler happened to be in the store during this conversation. He added a puzzling detail. One of the old fellow's burros, that mean dock-eared Jenny, had wandered into his camp about a month earlier. Butler recognized the animal as part of the Dutchman's outfit but hadn't seen the prospector himself. No one, as far as Rochester ever learned, saw the old Dutchman after they parted on the bank of the Colorado that morning in 1910 or 1911. That same year, Rochester made another trip down the Colorado. The summer runoff, backed up behind the newly built Laguna Dam, had altered the river bottom. Despite the mud deposits throughout the area, Rochester located the Dutchman's cart in the arrowweed thickets. Only the wheel tops were visible in the deep mud. The old man had never returned for his cart. Looking into the tangled hills, Rochester wondered if the Dutchman had ever made it back to his golden ledge. Weather had erased all cart tracks, and Rochester wasn't equipped for an extended search. He continued downriver, stopping at the Buena Vista mine, later the Senator mine. No miners there had seen the old prospector. 2 years later, Rochester again camped in the Rincon. This time, no trace of the cart remained. With a canteen and food, Rochester hiked into the barren hills, the old man's description still clear in his mind. He found a basin from which he could see a speck of river bottom. There was a water hole, an evidence where someone had hacked upper limbs off ironwood trees for burros to browse on. Rochester noted the absence of the usual tin can pile that would mark a modern prospector's camp. In those days, they seldom used canned rations and no camp signs were visible. Everything matched the Dutchman's description perfectly, except Rochester found the ledge but couldn't find the gold. The basin Rochester located lies north of what is now called Rochester Basin. It covers about 100 acres with 2 fair-sized washes cutting through it. Rochester traced a route the Dutchman could have used to enter from the Picacho side and exit toward Laguna Dam. This trail led to where Senator Wash would have blocked the cart, explaining why the old man turned downward toward the river and Rochester's camp. Everything aligned perfectly, except for the missing gold. In subsequent years, Rochester and his friend Earl Kerr of Picacho made many attempts to find the Dutchman's treasure. They kept the story private because the gold seemed certain to be there. After all, Rochester had seen it with his own eyes, but the rich vein eluded them. Years later, standing near where his Rincon had been, Rochester gazed into the hills from which the Dutchman had emerged nearly half a century earlier. If only he had backtracked him that first time. If just that once Rochester had followed those cart tracks. The wheels would have left marks any tracker could follow back to the basin and to the Dutchman's gold. The old Dutchman's rich strike remains undiscovered, one of countless lost treasures scattered across the American Southwest, waiting silently in the savage hills for someone to retrace the steps of a nameless prospector from a century ago. If you would like to contribute to my channel, join my Patreon community and discover my art print products on my website in the links provided in my description. Also, if you would like a particular image from my videos, give the timestamp for the image, and I will upload it to my website and Patreon. Thank you. In the unforgiving badlands of southeastern Arizona, where the Palancillo Mountains slice through the desert like ancient teeth, human bones still emerge from the sandy earth. These weathered remains tell a story of betrayal, murder, and a $3 million treasure that vanished into the desert over 140 years ago. This is the tale of Skeleton Canyon, where death came twice for Mexican smugglers, where outlaws turned on each other like rattlesnakes, and where one of the Old West's greatest treasures remains hidden to this day. Welcome to Southwest Desert. Today, we're riding into Skeleton Canyon, Arizona, where the bones of the dead still guard secrets worth dying for. Picture the southeastern corner of Arizona Territory in 1882. This land defies human comfort at every turn. The mountains rise like dark thunderclouds frozen in stone, their peaks so treacherous that even today, experienced hikers think twice before attempting certain passes. The valleys stretch endlessly, playing tricks on the eye in the crystalline desert air. The atmospheric clarity creates illusions that defy belief. Locals tell the story of a cowboy who swore he could see a woman wink at him from a mile away. Whether true or tall tale, it speaks to the eerie transparency of the desert atmosphere. Through this hostile terrain lies Skeleton Canyon, a serpentine gash in the earth connecting the Las Animas Valley of New Mexico to Arizona's San Bernardino Valley. Today, visitors find only profound silence, broken occasionally by the lowing of distant cattle or coyotes. But in 1882, this canyon witnessed such violence that its very name became a memorial to massacre. To understand the Skeleton Canyon tragedy, we must first meet William Brocious, though history remembers him better as Curly Bill, the self-proclaimed king of Arizona's outlaw territory. Standing well over 6 feet tall, Curly Bill dominated any room he entered. His skin, bronzed to leather by the desert sun, provided a striking canvas for piercing blue eyes that could shift from jovial warmth to Arctic coldness in a heartbeat. His dark hair, which curled as tightly as sheep's wool, gave him his nickname. His attire announced his profession. Elaborate high-heeled boots with intricate stitching clicked authoritatively on wooden floors. An enormous white sombrero crowned his imposing frame. Most notably, he wore twin gun belts in a distinctive crisscross fashion, each holster cradling a well-oiled .44 caliber revolver. Curly Bill operated from Galeyville, a remote settlement tucked into a canyon of the Chiricahua Mountains. The town's location made it perfect for outlaws, so far from law enforcement that the badge might as well have been on another planet. From this natural fortress, Curly Bill ran his empire of selective banditry. He claimed to rob only the wealthy, though his definition proved remarkably flexible. Any Mexican smuggling operation automatically qualified for his attention. In summer 1882, word reached Galeyville that set every outlaw's heart racing. Mexican bandits had accumulated proceeds from numerous robberies into one massive shipment, planning to move everything through Skeleton Canyon in August. The rumored value exceeded anything previously transported through the territory. Recognizing the opportunity of a lifetime, Curly Bill chose Hugh Hunt for infiltration. Hughes possessed the perfect combination. Mixed heritage gave him a swarthy complexion, allowing him to pass for Mexican, while fluent Spanish eliminated communication barriers. More importantly, Hughes could make friends quickly and naturally. Hughes crossed into Mexico, adopting the persona of a drifter seeking work. He haunted cantinas where smugglers gathered, buying drinks and sharing stories. Gradually, he worked into their confidence, participating in tequila toasts and commiserating about their dangerous profession. His patience paid spectacular dividends. Hughes confirmed the August passage through Skeleton Canyon and learned details that made Curly Bill's eyes glitter. The cargo included diamonds stolen from a Monterey bank, religious artifacts pillaged from churches, and enough gold and silver to outfit an army. Conservative estimates place the total value at $3 million. Hughes returned to Galeyville bursting with intelligence, only to discover Curly Bill had departed on unspecified personal business. Days stretched into weeks as Hughes waited. Each passing night he lay awake thinking about the treasure, $3 million. The number echoed in his mind with increasing insistence. Gradually, a treacherous thought took root. Why share such wealth with Curly Bill? Hughes began recruiting conspirators. First came Zwing Hunt, a veteran mule handler whose expertise with pack animals would prove essential. Next, Billy Grounds, a 19-year-old desperado whose youth belied his reputation with a gun. 5 other Galeyville inhabitants rounded out the gang. Hughes revealed just enough about the treasure to secure loyalty while maintaining his advantage. He established a blood oath of secrecy, making clear that death awaited anyone who breathed a word of their plans. On a moonless August night, Hughes and his conspirators departed Galeyville, crossing the San Simon Valley under brilliant stars. They reached Skeleton Canyon at dawn, taking positions among boulder formations that provided concealment and clear fields of fire. The Mexican pack train appeared exactly as predicted, 15 experienced smugglers guarding 30 heavily laden mules. The men rode with watchful alertness, knowing they carried a fortune through hostile territory. They kept weapons loose in holsters, eyes constantly scanning the canyon walls. At midday, the convoy reached the designated rest area near the canyon's exit. A large oak tree spread branches in welcome shade. The smugglers established a defensive perimeter while the main group sought comfort in the oak's shadow. Pack animals grazed on sparse desert grass. Then the canyon erupted in thunder and flame. The first volley came from 3 directions simultaneously, rifle fire echoing off canyon walls. 3 Mexicans dropped instantly. Survivors scrambled for cover as bullets whined off rocks and kicked up dust around them. Panic swept through the convoy. Men shouted contradictory orders while trying to control terrified horses. The mules, driven mad by gunfire, stampeded in all directions, their loads bursting open and scattering treasure across the canyon floor. Gold coins rang against stones, silver bars tumbled into ravines, and precious gems glittered in the dust. Surviving smugglers mounted whatever horses they could catch and fled. Hughes's men continued firing until the last Mexican disappeared into the desert heat. But the human targets were only part of their mission. Emerging from hiding spots, the outlaws began systematically slaughtering pack animals. The canyon echoed with gunfire for another hour. When silence finally descended, the scene resembled a slaughterhouse. Bodies of men and animals lay scattered throughout the canyon, but the outlaws had eyes only for the treasure. According to later testimony, the inventory staggered imagination. A cigar box containing diamonds worth $1 million, 39 gold bars valued at $600,000, scores of silver ingots, 90,000 Mexican gold dollars, countless sacks of gold pieces, and 2 life-size statues of pure gold stolen from a Mexican cathedral. Working efficiently, 2 outlaws excavated a cavity beneath the oak tree while others gathered scattered treasure. Every coin and precious stone was collected and deposited in this temporary cache. Hughes supervised meticulously, ensuring nothing was overlooked. Hughes made clear this burial was temporary until they could return with proper equipment. The gang departed for Galeyville as darkness fell, bound by their code of silence. Death awaited anyone who spoke. But Hughes had learned betrayal's value too well. Days later, he convened a private meeting with Hunt and Grounds, proposing to move the treasure to a more secure location. His true intention: eliminate other gang members from any share. The 3 conspirators hired an elderly Mexican teamster and procured a 4-horse wagon. Returning to Skeleton Canyon, they put the old man to work excavating the cache, promising him a percentage they never intended to pay. Once the treasure was relocated, Hunt and Grounds executed the Mexican, throwing his body into the empty cache. They slaughtered the horses and burned the wagon. Then, in the ultimate betrayal, Hunt and Grounds vanished with the treasure's location, leaving Hughes outmaneuvered at his own game. Hughes waited in Galeyville with growing rage as days passed without word. His fury crystallized into a single purpose: track down Hunt and Grounds, extract the treasure's location, and exact revenge. Hunt and Grounds had taken refuge at Chandler Ranch near Charleston, already wanted for murdering a judge's son. Their plan: lay low until heat dissipated, then return for the treasure. Fate intervened when Deputy Sheriff Healy stumbled upon the fugitives during a routine patrol. The resulting gunfight left Healy dead, Billy Grounds mortally wounded, and Zwing Hunt with 2 bullets through his lungs. Hunt was transported to Tombstone's hospital under armed guard. When Hughes learned of Hunt's capture, he raced toward Tombstone, desperate to extract the treasure's location. But accomplices spirited Hunt away through a rear exit before Hughes arrived. Months later, Hugh Hunt appeared in Tombstone claiming his relative Zwing had been killed by Apache raiders. He led authorities to a fresh grave in the Swiss Helm Mountains. The authorities accepted the story, closing the case. But Zwing Hunt wasn't dead. He had escaped to Mexico, where he spent years in exile, his wounded lungs never healing. The elaborate deception had provided safe passage from Arizona territory. Years later, in San Antonio, Texas, terminal gangrene in Hunt's old wounds brought him to his deathbed. He summoned Hugh Hunt for a final confession. "Find Davis Mountain," he whispered. "From its base, see the rolling plains east and western New Mexico. Go west 1.5 miles to a canyon with many curves. One side has tree-covered hills, the other a vertical cliff. A stream runs through it. Look for a 10-foot waterfall." His voice weakened. 2 springs about a mile apart, Silver Spring and Gum Spring. Between them, closer to Silver Spring, find a square stone. On its eastern face are 2 crosses, one above the other. The treasure lies beneath, $3 million waiting in the earth. But Hunt's landmarks don't exist where they should. There's no Davis Mountain in the area. No springs bear those names. No waterfall matches his description. Did Hunt deliberately mislead his relative? Did fever cloud his memory? Were his directions coded? Or had the treasure been moved again to some location whose secret died with them? In the end, Skeleton Canyon keeps its silence. The bones tell their story of violence and greed, while somewhere in that vast wilderness a fortune awaits, or perhaps only the dream of fortune, which has proven treasure enough for generations of seekers. In the rugged wilderness of southwestern Arizona, where the unforgiving desert meets the Colorado River, there's a story that still echoes through the canyons. It's about a man who lost not 1, but 2 fortunes. A man who could walk for days across terrain that would defeat modern vehicles, who knew every wash and mesa of the Trigo Mountains like the lines on his weathered palm. And yet, despite his intimate knowledge of this harsh landscape, he couldn't relocate the one thing that might have made him rich. A silver vein so pure that it glinted in the desert sun, waiting to be rediscovered. This is the tale of John Nummel and his lost silver mine, a mystery that has tantalized treasure hunters for nearly a century. Welcome to Southwest Desert, where we explore the forgotten stories of the American Southwest. I'm your host, and today we're traveling to a place that time has nearly forgotten, a corner of Arizona where prospectors once sought their fortunes and where one man's frustrating quest has become the stuff of local legend. Before we dive into this story, imagine walking 6 miles through mountains so rugged that modern 4-wheel drive vehicles struggle to navigate them. Now imagine doing this regularly, in your 70s, under the blistering Arizona sun. This was just an average day for John Nummel, a man so accustomed to this punishing terrain that his neighbors remember him simply as a great walker. John Nummel's story begins around 1880 when he arrived in the Silver District of southwestern Arizona. This area, lying between what is now Yuma and the California border, had just experienced a silver boom with the discovery of 3 significant mines: the Clip, the Red Cloud, and the Black Rock. These operations would collectively produce over $600,000 in lead-silver output between 1880 and 1889, though old-timers insisted the true figure was much higher. Nummel was there when the Red Cloud mine made its initial strike. He worked as a miner, though his restless nature kept him from staying in one position for long. As the years passed and silver prices fell, the mines began to shut down. Eventually, the Red Cloud, which had been the heart of the district, fell into disuse, and Nummel found himself in a new role, caretaker of the abandoned property. By the late 1920s, Nummel had established a unique lifestyle that few modern people could imagine. He lived in a cabin on the Colorado River at a place called Conger Point, also known as Nummel's Landing, about 75 miles northwest of Yuma. Ed Rochester, one of Nummel's contemporaries, described the location as being at the end of the world's worst road. Nummel's only motorized transportation was an ancient Model T truck with a worm drive. This vehicle was so unreliable that trips to Yuma often took a week in either direction. When the truck inevitably broke down, Nummel thought nothing of walking 10 miles to the river, calling across to friends on the other side and continuing his journey with their help. The mine was about 6 miles from his cabin as the crow flies, or 10 miles by the treacherous road, but the distance didn't trouble Nummel. During the summer months, when there was little to do at the mine, he regularly commuted between the two locations, almost always on foot. And here's where our story takes its fateful turn. On these walks, Nummel developed a habit that would both lead to his greatest discovery and his greatest frustration. Each time he traveled between the mine and his cabin, he took a different route, prospecting as he went. He would knock off samples from interesting outcroppings, carry them back to his cabin, and add them to a growing pile of rocks that he intended to examine, eventually. One day, on one of these routine walks, Nummel struck a ledge that looked promising. As was his custom, he broke off some samples and brought them back to his cabin, where they joined the other unexamined specimens. And there they might have remained indefinitely if not for a visit from Walter Riley, a prominent mining man from Yuma and a longtime friend of Nummel's. Riley noticed something special about some of the rocks in Nummel's collection. With the old prospector's blessing, he took samples back to Yuma for assay. The results were stunning. The rock contained extraordinarily high-grade silver. When Riley returned to share the news, his excitement couldn't be contained. "Where did you get that rock?" Riley demanded. "If there's enough of it, you've got a bonanza." Nummel examined the samples and claimed he remembered the day, the place, and the ledge from which he had collected them. But when he led Riley to the spot, they found only worthless rock. His memory had failed him. Desperately, the aging prospector tried to recall the correct location. Several possibilities came to mind, and he methodically checked each one. None led to the silver-rich ledge. Finally, he embarked on an exhaustive reinvestigation of every possible route between the Red Cloud mine and his cabin, searching every wash, every trail, every path he might have taken. The silver ledge remained hidden. The problem was compounded by the extent of Nummel's wanderings. In his decades of exploring the region, he had traversed virtually every square mile of the Trigo Mountains. He had hiked to Castle Dome Landing, to the river opposite Picacho, and all the way to Cibola Valley, far upriver, where he maintained a 40-acre homestead. Given the vast area Nummel had covered and the unmarked nature of his routes, it's perhaps unsurprising that he never relocated his silver ledge. The landscape he traversed was so empty and broken that no unmarked path through it could ever be retraced precisely. Even for a man who knew the desert as intimately as John Nummel, some secrets remained hidden. But silver wasn't the only treasure Nummel discovered in his desert wanderings. Perhaps his most unusual find was what he called his petrified turtles. According to Clyde Stewart, another local who knew Nummel well, the prospector described these objects as big, just like desert turtles. They were thick through and had legs, but John couldn't see any heads. They were solid rock, but he didn't find them in rock. They were lying loose alongside the wash. What were these mysterious formations? Stewart had his theory. John said he found them in granite hills, but there must be andesite or rhyolite somewhere in that canyon, and these large geodes in the shape of turtles washed out from it. Old John talked about it so much he started believing he had some petrified turtles. Ed Rochester, meanwhile, believed Nummel found them in red sandstone. He had heard from sources he considered reliable that one specimen was sent to a scientific institution, where it was identified as a genuine fossil turtle. Unlike his silver ledge, Nummel knew exactly where his turtles were located. However, he remained secretive about their whereabouts. Once, on a trip with Rochester, Nummel promised to show him the mountains with the turtles, but the old prospector was very elderly by then, and the side excursion never materialized. As for the lost silver mine, there seems little doubt that Nummel's discovery was genuine. The Silver District was known for its rich deposits, and the old-timers who knew Nummel accepted his story without question, though they differed on where his ledge most likely lay. José Alvarado, another contemporary, offered this intriguing possibility. A Dutchman who worked at the King of Arizona while I operated the mill there had a mine between the Red Cloud and Mojave tanks, going toward Ehrenberg. Native silver. That could have been John's ledge. Alvarado added an even more tantalizing detail. And the Indians used to bring pure silver into Castle Dome Landing, used it for arrow points. While I was at the King, an old Yaqui, a Gambesino called Placer Mike, told us, "If you fellows want silver, I will tell you a place in this country where you can load up all you want." He said he found it at the foot of a sharp peak, big vein, black on the outside, but it was almost pure silver when he broke it. John Nummel continued living at his riverside cabin and searching for his lost ledge throughout the 1930s. After he began receiving a pension, he moved to Laguna Dam, where he built a shack among a community of old prospectors. From there, he eventually went to the Pioneers' home in Prescott, where he died in 1948. Anyone tempted to search for Nummel's silver today should consider the long and fruitless hunt conducted by the man who discovered it in the first place, a man who knew that terrain better than anyone. They should also acknowledge the deadly nature of the desert Nummel traversed with such apparent ease. The Red Cloud had another caretaker after Nummel, a man named Walter Nelson. Less than a month after being visited by a writer in 1955, Nelson was found dead beside his car, which had stalled in deep sand 5 miles down Red Cloud Wash. The desert that John Nummel had mastered for decades had claimed another life. He may not have grown rich here, the writer concluded, but John Nummel mastered the land. And perhaps that was John Nummel's true legacy, not a lost silver mine, but a life lived in harmony with one of America's most challenging landscapes. He had found a way to thrive where others merely survived, to find joy in isolation, and to see potential wealth where others saw only barren rock. The Silver Ledge remains lost to this day, another entry in the long catalog of desert treasures that continue to captivate our imagination. But the story of John Nummel, the great walker who twice glimpsed fortune only to lose it again, reminds us that sometimes the journey itself is the real treasure. Thank you for joining your desert frontiersman Alan for another Southwest Gold story. Check out my large catalog of Southwest videos and playlists on historical tales, legends, lost gold stories, and adult bedtime stories. If you like a certain image from my videos, tell me in comments and give timestamp. Happy trails! Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.